Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the giraffe attack. Now the giraffe attack, of course, when I was originally discussing this with my wife earlier, was the idea of using giraffes launched on big springboards to kind of just smack into low-flying aircraft. But the reality is the giraffe attack gets its name from the way that the profile is designed for the actual strike itself. Basically what you're going to be doing is approaching a target, usually at an oblique, at a very, very low altitude, and then popping up at the last possible second, hence the shape of a giraffe, and then attacking it directly. So what we have here is if I zoom out, and as you can see, we're in the middle of the 80s, and we're on the Iran-Iraq border, kind of a thing like that. And you can imagine exactly where we're going this, except it's not the Iran-Iraq border because that's Afghanistan. Iraq is over here. This is just what happens when you don't watch your maps carefully. You shut your labels back off. But it's going to demonstrate my point perfectly today. So what we have is two F-14s. I'm going to go ahead and pause real fast here. F-14s were very, very prickly targets during the Iran-Iraq War. Unfortunately, it's now the Iran-Afghanistan War, but oh well. And one of the things that made them very prickly is the fact that their range was spectacular. Let's go ahead and open these guys up so you can get a feel for it. By clicking on them, you can see that I have a massive, massive field of view here of, let's see here, that's a 75 nautical miles. That's a very, very wide look here. The other thing you're going to observe is the fact that I have a bunch of bogeys here that we've already identified with the ANOG, meaning my lovely little radar, because of its fantastic range, plus its fantastic missile range, gives us one heck of a huge advantage as far as spotting enemy targets go. I mean, if you want to look at it this way, these targets are 113 nautical miles, and they are notching the radar, just to give you an idea of the staggering capability of the system. So, of course, during the war, that's a problem. You can't just have somebody who can basically run AWACS, or if you want to think of it another way, use these AIM-54s basically with impunity. So the strategy we're going to employ is we're going to take advantage of all this terrain that we have here. And we're going to remain at altitude that's very, very low, and then we're going to pop up. One of the tricky things about the F-14, we'll go ahead and disagree, make these guys disappear just to be fair, is the fact that the radar itself is a mechanically scanned radar. That means if you look at it from the side, we can only look so many degrees down. Anybody who's ever played a flight sim before, especially like an F-15 or something, knows that you have to adjust the elevation of your antenna if you want to see things that are closer to you, especially if they are below you. Otherwise, your antenna is only going to be seeing things that you're basically looking at the front here. So what we need to do is we need to figure out where our 30-degree antenna limit is going to be. Now, this requires a little bit of fancy math for us, but the good news is we already know the altitude of this particular target. It's at 45,000 feet here, which makes it, again, yes, I boosted it up a little bit to kind of demonstrate things a little bit better here. We would know that if 45,000 feet up, a 45-degree angle would be 45,000 feet down. We can actually do the math real quick with the arc sine on that if you want to get pretty fancy. But the very, very short version of the fact is, as now since we're at about 9 miles up, that gives us about a 13, about 1.5-ish kind of a range outside of it, which is pretty darn close. That also means that we have to remain at low altitude with my MiGs here until we cross within the particular point, which is basically going to be here. Then we can come up underneath that mechanical limit. If I'm detected prior to that point, that means those F-14s are going to be ranging some really, really high altitude AIM-54s down on us, which is going to make a big mess of my entire plan here. Now, one of the things that makes these kind of attacks very effective is the whole idea of trying to stay out of the lobe to begin with, then move into position. So in an ideal scenario, we actually want to limit ourselves, if I put in God's eye view here, to actually staying here and basically taking advantage of the little miss here and then sneaking in to do its attack. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, if you have all day and all afternoon, why don't you just kind of come around and do one of these things from the side? You absolutely can do an attack like that. That's excellent. But you're also having to keep that in mind that when you do something like that, which is obviously going to be safer than coming at them at the front, because they always risk basically detecting you, there might be terrain limitations, there might be SAMs, there might be other objectives that limit your corridors to actually attack this particular target. The other consideration we have to make too is our little target. I'll speed up time just a tiny bit here. So we have to consider the amount of time that everything is going to take to kind of to get into position here. So our F-14, because of the incredible missile range here of 75 nautical miles, keep in mind for us, it's probably going to be about half that, just because it's a 50% shot. We're going to be trying to take a shot at them with this particular aircraft, which has only got a range of, on a good day, about 60 nautical miles. That is going to tell us that we need to get within that distance, and we need to stay within that distance long enough to actually attack our targets. Now, one of the things that a lot of these aircraft have the capability to do, of course, is to look around. Not only are they reliant on their regular old radar sensors, they're also going to be reliant on anybody giving them information, as well as providing them with visual sensors, especially in F-14. So one of the things we're going to have to figure out here is one of the things I really wish we had in command is I could right click and say identify target. And then when I identified it, I could identify what it is so I could like predict what its thing's going to be here. But we're unfortunately going to have to do this manually. So we're going to have to stay at low altitude and use the terrain to hide us as we sneak up on the target at absolute minimum here. So we're going to stay nice and low and we're going to start creeping up on our F-14 targets here. Now, our two F-14s here have been programmed to engage anything they see. So if they see something at any time, they're immediately going to start getting interested. Now, if I go press Control V real fast, you can see that my little radar cone here, we are just barely outside of the radar cone. So we're actually completely safe down here. And one of the great things is, since this F-14, even though it's got a really nice camera on it, is looking down at us, we're going to be lost in the terrain very, very easily. And anybody who's ever tried to use that sensor will tell you the fact that that sensor, if you don't have anything to cue it with, you're probably not going to find what you're looking for. It's a very, very much looking through a straw kind of a sensor sort of a thing here. One thing we can think about doing too, and this would be more of a real world strategy, is we could try to notch the radar as aggressively as it can. So what we can actually do is put ourselves at an oblique like this, trying to prevent that radar from having that nice, clean, direct, looking right at us, looking right away from us. One of the big limitations in the F-14 also is the fact that it's going to have a little more difficulty seeing targets leaving it, or I should say going away, a chase aspect, if you want to think about it, versus a approach aspect. So we're just going to come spinning around here, and we can see my F-14s are making their way across. If I go back to God's eye view here, you can see we're way outside of this range here. So what we're going to do now is we're basically going to stay at this low altitude and start planning for our actual strike here. So I'm going to go get this all nice and set up. So we're going to kick up the speed a little bit. Now, one of the downsides is that we are using MiG-23s here. MiG-23s are really good airplanes. Like, they're really, really good airplanes. But unfortunately, because of their range, this would be very, very difficult to do because of that kind of a fact. So what we're going to try to do is stay nice and low and not be detected by our F-14 buddies. Of course, as I'm doing the math in my head real quick, I realize my attack point's actually going to be right there, which is double points for us because we basically get to come sneaking around here. Now, one of the fun things that you can always do, too, is you can try to estimate these distances. Control D, that's 30 nautical miles. 30 divided by, whoops, I'll go ahead and show that to you so you can see my calculations here. 480 times 60, that's 4 minutes to get to that point. Now, if I click on this one right here and press F2, it'll tell me it's going to take 5 minutes and 24 seconds to get to that point. Isn't that handy? You can just do the math, and that's the one thing I love about Command, is all these little pieces are basically there, built in, ready for you to use. So my guys are going too slow, so I'm actually going to kick them up to afterburn here, which, yes, I know it's a low-altitude afterburn. You're going to have to forgive us for that one, because that's going to decrease our time substantially. By the way, one of the cool things they changed in the last version of Command, which I'm very excited about, is they finally reduced the acceleration on airplanes. You're going to sit here going, that's bad. That means they cannot run missiles. Oh, I see what they did there. Anyone who does military flight sims probably is well aware of the fact that aircraft actually take a long time to get up to speed. If you're doing like a Mach 2 airplane kind of a thing like that, it could take as much as 15 minutes to get up to that speed. But what we had previously is you could basically instantaneously accelerate, which is just not realistic. And I'm really, really excited to see that they're finally changing that. I like that. Notice, by the way, my time to go is 4 minutes and 14 seconds. It's like I planned it out or something like that. All right, so let's speed up time a little bit here. Keep in mind, our aircraft are burning through fuel like crazy. It probably would have been much better on my part, but for the sake of the video, I tried to keep it simple. It's to actually attack through these mountains here, so there's even less likely to be picked up. So let's go ahead and swing over to Iran. Iran's completely clueless. Keep in mind, this is Afghan Iran right now, so you'll forgive me for that one. All right, let's see what we got. So now we're going to start getting ready to execute the giraffe. That doesn't sound right at all. So executing the giraffe is simply a matter of doing a pop-up attack on the target, trying to collect as much altitude as possible and basically get them inside of your kill zone. One of the things you have to watch out for is a lot of aircraft have limited capability to basically shoot themselves upwards. So even though we're MiG-23s here, we're not going to have the raw acceleration that our F-14s actually are going to be capable of here. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. That the other thing, too, is we're going to be firing up and we're not going to be firing out. That's going to put us at a bit of a disadvantage here as far as our attack goes. So switching back to the F-14's perspective, notice clueless. We actually executed this attack a little late here. By gaining a little bit of altitude, we can sneak in. Timing this part is the hard part because if you get the timing on this wrong, you're either going to be too low to get a good shot, you're going to be too far away to get a good shot, or you're going to be spotted early, which now means that that's going to be the end of everything we're doing here, which is why these things are tricky. Also, notice, by the way, I am not using any radars on my MiG-23s. If I tried to do that, that would get me all sorts of nasty and busted. So we're more than close enough now to go ahead and take our shot. This is not an optimum shot ever because now I've got an oblique. And again, this is what I get for not planning ahead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and shut off throttle here. I'm going to press, go ahead and click on them, F1, drag on, go, hostile. Why did they change that? I liked it the way it was before. I don't know why they felt the need to change that. Of course, you're saying, what did they change? F1, click and drag. Why did they change that? So I'm going to go ahead and order the attack now. So these guys are immediately going to start climbing, and they're going to be putting on speed very rapidly, which is incredibly critical for these aircraft, because without that speed, this is not going to be a very successful attack. So now if we swing back over to our F-14s here. So you guys catch the baseball game? Yeah, it was a pretty good baseball game. What did you think of the baseball? Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good baseball game. And they're looking through their TCS. They're looking down at their NAWG. And these guys are just climbing like crazy. Now, remember, this shot is very challenging because you're going to have to take it at a higher altitude. You're shooting up, which means the required distance to take the shot is going to be minimum. Now, from the side right now, this is where the draft comes from. Missiles away. Now, our F-14 buddies, of course, they did not fire the requisite number of missiles. That was actually very sloppy. These guys suddenly know there's something back there because the radar suddenly flipped on. So they're immediately going to go defensive. They know that there's all sorts of problems behind them, and they're going to start doing their pieces. Oh, one's out. Oh, geez. Here comes the other one. Here comes the other one. We got both. I did not actually expect to get both right away here. So now our F-14 is panicking as he's trying to turn around here and trying to engage his buddies, as now he's trying to outrun another missile. And again, this was a very lucky attack as far as timing goes, and these guys were never spotted at any point. This can be all different, of course. And of course, you're saying, what's going to be a good defense against this? Well, the big thing is having people at different altitudes is a huge defensive measure here. Of course, this guy's got to pull right into that MiG. Oh! You got MiG'd, and you can see exactly how effective that is and how they never even saw that they were coming. Enjoy.